This is IAQ Radio, Indoor Air Quality Radio, the voice of the indoor air quality industry, with your hosts, Radio Joe Hughes and the Z-Man, Cliff Zlotnick. And now, Radio Joe Hughes.
Good day wherever you're listening from, and welcome to Indoor Air Quality Radio. It's Friday, July 7th, 2017, 4th of July week. We're taking the week off, and we're going to flash back to a show we did on 9/19/2008. This was episode number 95 with Major Long. Major Long is a fire restoration pioneer. We've been putting together some nice restoration pioneer shows over the last couple months here, and Cliff's redoing some blogs and doing blogs for ones we didn't have one for. Before we get started, let's thank our marquee sponsors.
IAQ Radio marquee sponsors are John Don Products, where restoration and abatement contractors shop. Visit them at jondon.com. That's JONDON.com. Healthy Indoor Magazine, a free online digital magazine for industry professionals and consumers. Subscriptions are available at IAQ.net. Legends Environmental Insurance, the experts in insurance for environmental consultants and contractors for over 20 years at legends-enviro.com. That's legends-enviro.com.
Our guest today is what I consider to be the perfect embodiment of a Southern gentleman, Major Leonard Long. By the time I joined the predecessor of the Restoration Industry Association in the mid-1970s, Major Long had established himself as a successful entrepreneur, restorer, and disaster restoration industry leader. In the Atlanta, Georgia area, he built a highly successful disaster restoration business model known as SmokeMaster, which he subsequently franchised. To the best of my knowledge, Major Long was the first disaster restoration consultant offering to fly anywhere to provide disaster restoration consulting and estimating services to fellow restorers. He was always ahead of the curve when it came to embracing and adopting or developing new technology, whether it was a spiffy new camera that could incorporate the date on photos or developing, using, and marketing what may have been the industry's first disaster restoration estimating program. Major was always approachable and willing to share his expertise and ideas. He was president of RIA's predecessor in 1980 and also served a stint as a disaster restoration technical director there. Major unselfishly shared business tactics, trade secrets with fellow restorers and association members. He is a humble and an unsung industry pioneer who now lives in the Smoky Mountains of North Carolina. When Major learned that my family had developed some new smoke odor removal technology, he volunteered to beta test it for us. Major Long is the individual who taught me the most in the field of disaster restoration. We're privileged to chat with him today on IAQ Radio. Good afternoon, Major.
Good afternoon, Cliff.
Okay. Well, Major, why don't you give us a little bit of background about what you did before you went into disaster restoration?
Well, I went into fire restoration at a very young age, but in particular, after attending high school or graduating, I attended the University of Georgia for 1 year and found that I wasn't really good at it, but I would pick it up later. So I joined the 101st Airborne, and for 2 years spent at Fort Campbell, Kentucky, and then after leaving there, I married Susan, my first wife, at 20 years old, for 21 years old, and I entered into partnership with my father-in-law in the construction of apartments and homes, in which he built spec homes and spec apartments, which proved to be very risky because working with him for 4 years, we went bankrupt. So this phase, though, proved very successful and useful for me in identifying structure, methods, and problems and components, and also the process of hiring and utilizing subcontractors and laborers was also an important tool that I learned during that period that went forward in my success in fire restoration. I think that's about.
That's good.
Okay. Well, what caused you to decide to enter the disaster restoration industry or disaster repair business?
Well, after the construction failure, I partnered with a high school friend whose mother had a carpet cleaning business. He wanted to break away from his mother, and with my money, we started a new carpet cleaning firm with about $10,000. During this period, several adjusters asked us to rectify some smoke damage, and in this learning experience, I severed the partnership and started my new company, Smokemaster. I think that answers that one.
Smokemaster.
Yeah, it's a great name. What sort of equipment did you have when you started Smokemaster? What did it consist of?
Well, my upholstery dry cleaning was accomplished with a solvent and bucket towel method.
Right.
And to wet clean, I used a certified upholstery machine. Or by hand, I used a soap solution with a bucket and terry cloth towels. Very simple methods, but at the time they were what we had to work with. On carpets, until the advent of steam, I used a Hill rotary brush solution tank machine with a Hill tank vacuum for extraction. And then I purchased one of the first deep steam carpet cleaning machines about 1975 for $5,500. And after using it for about 2 months, I purchased two more from the Canadian company.
Why don't you tell us a little bit about that machine? You know, what did it look like? What was it made out of? You know, was it hard to learn how to use it? You know, was it complicated?
Well, it was it was made out of completely shiny stainless steel, so it was an impressive piece of equipment to roll into, you know, into somebody's home or business. It had a base on wheels which held the mechanical components, and then it had two stainless steel commercial coffee pot urns on top of that were the fresh water and recovery tanks. Also, they were so beautiful that seeing them in action would always bring tears to my eyes almost.
Yeah, I mean, I remember those machines very, very well. And I mean, 55. What year was this? You spent $5,500?
1975.
Wow. I mean, you could probably buy a car for that.
Yeah.
Well,
I suspect
it was, but at the time I was so impressed with steam carpet cleaning, and there was no one even in the Atlanta area that had steam. So I was the first steam carpet cleaner in Atlanta, which is, you know, a big population. So it was really, it was a very impressive machine to me.
Yeah, they used to dry. I'm sorry.
They were always easy to break down, you know, for transportation into the job, and it weighed, I guess, about 75 pounds, and was usually transported upstairs with a crew of two, but could be handled with one strong employee, you know, by breaking it down. Of course, by this time in my career, I managed to get out of the most physical work, so I didn't have to cope with myself.
Well, you know, going back, I kind of remember those days as well. It's pretty dramatic because the customer, you know, could really see the difference. I think we used drag wands back then, you know, for cleaning the carpet. You kind of drag it across almost like a lawnmower, you know, moving backwards, and they were weighted, and it was pretty dramatic. I mean, the photographs that you could take were really, you know, whether they were postcards or whatever the brochures that were utilized to market that. It was a very, very impressive program. Well, how did you wash walls back then? What did you use for that?
Well, at one point, well, probably forever, I used a all-purpose cleaner, you know, in a bucket with rags, and a vacuum cleaner, you know, to pull it off, or either terry cloth towels. But at one point, I bought a machine from, I believe it was a company called Wallmaster. It seemed like back then everyone had to put master on there.
Right.
But anyway, this was a wall cleaning machine, and I think I paid almost $10,000 for it.
Wow.
And it didn't do twat. You'd put rags on the end, and it had a vacuum system and a spray system, but it didn't do as well as just the hand. If we couldn't clean it with sponges, then and had to wet clean it, it probably needed to be painted anyway. So you did the best you could to get the loose soot off, and that's all I was trying to do, not get dirt and marks off the wall. I was trying to get the loose soot, or at least the soot that I could get off before it was painted.
Yeah, my hat still goes off to you, chasing that technology. You were always out there, and, a lot of times the first adopters really have the opportunity to take, advantage of this.
So I just wanted to check, you were using that machine to clean up after fires or just general cleaning?
Oh, I didn't do any general cleaning.
I see.
Never.
Okay, I just wanted to make
If it
sure.
wasn't smoked up, I didn't have anything to do with it.
So you did some carpet cleaning, and then you started doing a lot of fire restoration.
Right.
I see.
I did clean carpets before I went into fire restoration, but that was, the beginning. But then after I got involved in fire restoration, I would not clean carpet for people that had dirty carpet.
Well, how did
I was too busy.
How did you get into the fire restoration business? Did adjusters call you, or did they get to know about you through some other means?
Well, I usually called on them when I first found out I needed to get my work from insurance adjusters, and I found out where they all were, and I made it a point to call on them on a regular basis, whether they gave me any work or not, until they were sick of seeing me. But in most cases, if it was a big fire, the only recourse was at the time for them to use Service Master, and a lot of them were very upset with Service Master by the time I came in to business. So it was fortunate that I came in during that period. And I took a lot of their business away, of course, over the course of, so many years.
I think that's
which
a great.
pleased me enormously, since at one point, they took my name away. So
Yeah, we'll
I
get
was
it.
glad to hurt at least their Atlanta franchise.
Yeah, well, we're going to get it. We're going to get into that in a bit. Tell me a little bit about what your facility was like when you first started your business, and then, did it evolve at all, and how it may have evolved?
Well, when I first went into business, I was having to utilize my father-in-law's basement to clean rugs because I didn't have a plant. So it had so many posts in it that I could only clean about a quarter of a 9x12 rug at a time, and then I'd have to roll it out, and until I got the whole thing cleaned, and then I'd put it out in his backyard to dry on the grass. But then the neighbors started complaining when they saw 30 or 40 rugs out there, and
Right.
so I finally had to leave that particular situation. But then at some point after that, I rented a little warehouse that had about 1,200 square feet in it, and I was able to use it to put furniture from fires in, and also clean rugs and do whatever. It wasn't big enough to really expand into, but it was a start. Until somehow one night it burned down with all the people's furniture in there that I'd already picked up from fire. So the Atlanta Journal made a big deal of the man that specializes in cleaning up their fire damages. His plant burns down. So anyway, that was a bad start. But anyway, it was a start. And then I moved to another warehouse, and eventually I got more fires and more trucks and more personnel, and everything worked out real good.
How did you come up with this vault storage idea and packing out and so on and so forth?
Well, it's been an idea around for a long time with moving and storage companies, and I used to buy my boxes, for pack outs from moving and storage places before I started buying them directly from the box people. But I saw the way they vaulted all their furniture, and it looked substantially neater than what I was used to. So I took that idea and went with it, and it worked out real good.
I was just at a big contents cleaning place this week, Amrestore down in Baltimore, and they have those big vaults all through the place. So they're still using it today, Major.
Yeah, he was the fellow that introduced it to the industry. What did you use for smoke odor removal when back in those days?
Well, we used several different kind of machines. One was I still can't remember the name of the shotgun machine that you used to sell, the real long.
Oh, that was a Thermogen, but before that, I remember you were using.
Thermogen.
I remember you were using a Microgen ULV. Can you tell us a little bit about that one?
Well, that's the only one that I had, and I really I don't think I got real sold on it. I just you can probably tell me more about what that machine is like than I can.
Well, I remember that machine. Again, it was a state-of-the-art machine, and that machine was probably $3,000 or $4,000 in the early '70s as well. And that was the first machine that could take a liquid and break it down into fine droplets. And what was cool about that machine is it was powered by a chainsaw motor. And there was a little blower on there, and the blower on there was actually the supercharger for a Porsche. And you put the solution in, and I'll never forget. You had a photograph of, I think, one of your employees up in an attic, and I remember he had a red shirt. He was an African American guy, and he had his respirator on, and he was up there just fogging the heck out of that attic. And I was pretty impressed, actually, because I knew about the technology because I came out of the pest control field, and we used them there. But I mean, again, that was another pricey piece of equipment, and you were one of the first people that utilized it. Did your firm do full service, Major? Did you do decorating and painting and structural repairs and all that stuff, or did you just do personal property?
Well, we did personal property, but we also did cleaning and deodorization of structure. We didn't, if it needed to be gone any further with painting or redecorating, then we left that for the contractors, because the contractors in Atlanta didn't have too many ways to get people to do the work we did as far as cleaning the structure before them. So they would utilize us as a subcontractor a lot. So we didn't want to in any way, step on their toes. So we found it to be successful just to work, within the realm of the things we knew how to do.
What's interesting is your business, I guess, had its ups and had its downs, and how did you? Let's talk a little bit about pricing, and well, first of all, let's talk about confidence. I mean, were you nervous when you would get called up for a project? An adjuster would call you to clean a house or clean a building. I mean, did you get nervous, or did the adrenaline get going? Were you confident, or?
Well, sometimes when I believe when I got let's say a high-rise building that has had a fire and the executive floors are smoked up, and I know that all of a sudden, in order to make an impression, I've got to have at least 60 extra people there, and that would kind of make me nervous until I got everything kind of going in the right direction. But I knew I could do it because no one else could, so I knew I could do it. But that was something that I maybe would get a little nervous over. I know one particular one. I had a real bad fire in a Firestone store that had a basement that had, I think it had 40,000 tires in the basement, and a lot of them burned up in that fire because the fire started in the basement. It had this awful, terrible burnt tire odor, and I had to get a lot of people in there and day and night to clean. This was when I was first went into business, and I stayed there for one day, one night, and another day, and I was going into the second night, and I just passed out, and I looked like I had yellow jaundice, my skin turned yellow, and I just passed out, and they had to take me to the hospital. So I would say that would be being nervous.
You may have been a little run down too. Did they tell you in the hospital what they thought the problem was?
They said it looked like yellow jaundice, but it looked like I was just exhausted, So, and my body just turned on me, and just said that's it, and I just fainted.
Well, if you think about what you're breathing in that building as well, particulate and.
Right.
I don't think anyone really thought much about respiratory protection or anything back then. And, I think of the things that we did, ripping off asbestos roofs and doing demolition, and no one really thought much about it. How did you know how much to charge, Major? How did you evolve your pricing method? Did you do this time and material? Did you do this unit cost? Did you kind of make it up on the fly? Did you keep records, in the past of, where you made money and where you may have lost money, or was it intuitive?
I guess all of those things, Cliff.
Okay.
at one time or the other, I had to use whichever method was asked of me. I preferred not to give, prices beforehand on big jobs, but sometimes I had to, so I just had to kind of wing it and guess. But I didn't like to do time and material estimates. I never liked to do that. If somebody insisted on an estimate, I'd give them a line estimate, and they could take it or leave it. But in a lot of cases, if they just wanted me to do it and didn't care what it cost, then it would probably cost them the same thing. But I tried to always make money on smoke damage losses.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm just curious, how did you decide, what methods worked best or what doesn't? What was it, just trial and error? Did you have some resources you tried to pull together?
Well, let's take the Firestone store with all the tires in the basement that had to each be cleaned, and so I got. I never did it before, but I thought, well, how am I going to do this? So I got 8 troughs that you have in for cows. They're made out of metal, and they drink out of them.
Mm-hmm.
And so I got 6 of those, so we could fill it full of soapy solution, and they could just spin the tires in there and wash all the tires. So that was something you just had to think up. How are you going to do it? And that worked. Of course, it didn't work on me very well on that job. We got the job done.
What about the soot removal? What methods were you using for that back then?
Well, we had the chemical sponges back then, and that was, of course, the best thing in the world for getting smoke off of drywall, my latex paint. So that was the primary method, but then I also had a company make some purple cleaner that was, like we get today, that's purple cleaner in the grocery store, but it was the same thing back then, but I had them put them in gallon jugs for me with labels stating they were smoke and grease remover product, and that was something we used with a bucket and terry cloth towel methods to clean enamel walls or surfaces that are not that can be washed.
Chemical.
Go
ahead. I'm sorry.
The chemical sponges you're aware of.
Oh yeah, and I would suspect that the chemical that you had made, if it worked effectively, would have been similar to what the listeners would know as 409 or Fantastic. A lot of those have what's called a glycol ether in them, or a degreaser in them, and I mean even Windex utilized some of that technology. So it just depended how much, and it's pretty good at melting that.
Windex
that
is not
smoke
strong
resin.
enough, so.
No, but I meant Windex utilized a glycol ether as well, but not as strong as Fantastic or 409. So, you're definitely right there.
Well, you're the chemical man.
Well, I'm trying to be, man.
Well, let's before we move on, why don't we quickly thank our sponsors one more time here, and then
IAQ Radio would like to thank our association sponsors. The Indoor Air Quality Association, a nonprofit multidisciplinary organization dedicated to promoting the exchange of indoor environmental information through education and research. Visit them at iaqa.org. Particles Plus, engineers and manufacturers, feature rich particle counters, air quality monitoring, instrumentation, and vacuum pump technology. ParticlesPlus.com. Count on us. Gray Wolf Sensing Solutions, who use advanced sensor software technology and embedded computers to provide superior environmental test instrumentation. Visit them, wolfsense.com. IAQ marquee sponsors are John Don Products, where restoration and abatement contractors shop. Visit them at johndon.com. That's JONDON.com. Healthy Indoor Magazine, a free online digital magazine for industry professionals and consumers. Subscriptions are available at IAQ.net. Legends Environmental Insurance, the experts in insurance for environmental consultants and contractors for over 20 years at legends-enviro.com. That's legends-enviro.com.
Okay, Major, in your history, did you ever work for anyone famous?
I did. I was fortunate enough to be a consultant on Jackie Gleason's house in Miami when he had a very bad fire, and it was an enormous residence, and it was just amazing to go in to see as many things that he had. Like in the playroom, he had 4 pool tables, that instead of having just one, and things like that. It was just amazing. His books he had at least 3,000 books that were all first editions, leather bounds, and every one of those had to be cleaned or pre-cleaned before it was put in a box, so that it wouldn't be smashed in, So it was a very interesting job, and I enjoyed being on that one.
what did he have photographs? I would imagine he had some really good photographs and things like that. How do you handle those during a fire damage?
Well, it depends on whether he had a lot of them that had glass on the front, protected by good framing and good paper on the back, and usually those can be protected, but where you have oil paintings, that hit the crux of the heat, then sometimes you can't do anything for them. If it's smoke, sometimes you can take care of it, restore the painting or the print. But if there's a lot of heat involved, that's something that, as a consultant, I had to take each piece and determine what can be done with it or whether it's a total loss.
Did you send them off the valuable, like the oil paintings? I know people use like the Chicago Art Conservancy and places like that. Was that available to you then?
Sure. Oh yes, it's always been available in Atlanta or Miami or any big city. There, you don't have to send it to a museum. They're art restorers. That actually a lot of them own framing places, and they also do restorations too. So. They're more than glad to take care of it, and if it can be done, then they'll do it.
Very good, Cliff.
Did you get it? Tell us a little bit about how you handled wood furniture, that you would run into.
Wood furniture was we had a product from Chemspec called Wood Cream that, and I think you later had the same thing,
similar
under
right.
another name, and which was very good on taking the smoke off of hardwood furniture, and also Unsmoke had a little canned deodorant that they had in cans that you could put in the drawers over a period of time that would remove the smoke odor, which were very good. We used a lot of those.
What would you do if cleaning didn't work?
Well, then we didn't do refinishing ourselves, but we would send it out to be refinished, or either determine whether the piece is worth refinishing. You know, if we found in the plant that we could not restore the hardwood piece to, you know, pre-fire condition, and it was going to cost, in my estimation, more to refinish it than it would be to total loss it for the customer, then I would give the customer that choice to decide what to do.
See, that was really a trick question, Major, that we asked you that, because we got a hold of your application for the National Institute of Fire Restoration, and in this you listed your primary business areas as wood furniture cleaning, wall and floor cleaning, upholstery cleaning, carpet cleaning, and furnace and duct cleaning. So this probably goes back to the 1970s, and you know, I remember you had some pretty slick color brochures pretty early on when, you know, no one had that type of marketing material, and you had there was a photograph that you had in there, and it looked as though you had taken a piece of tape or whatever, and you know, to separate this chest of drawers that was in there. And I remember, you know, one half was beautifully restored, and you know, the other half was looking pretty bad. That was just, you know, one of those photos that, you know, has stuck in my mind for a long time. But speaking of marketing, what was the best marketing thing that you ever did in terms of marketing your business?
Well, I did this particular ploy before I even had to use it, because I knew I would have to use it one day. I had a 8x10 rug that you have made with the lettering in it, and I had it Smokemaster at work and the phone number, and I knew I would use that someday on a big commercial loss. And sure enough, I didn't have it more than 2 months, and this high-rise apartment building had a fire, and I put it right in the lobby, even though I hadn't gotten any work out of the building yet. I put it right as you walk in through the front door, and these were all older rich ladies that lived here. I had the phone ringing until I had to tell them to stop. We couldn't do anymore, you know, because there were so many. There was at least 100 apartments with expensive furniture in there. And I always, when I got to a saturation point on location work, or even on packouts, I'd have to say, I can't do anymore. You'll have to call ServiceMaster or New Look or another one of my competitors, because we can't do anymore. We're sorry, but we can't do anymore. So, but that worked perfect. I got more work out of that one rug than anything I've ever done.
I'm curious, do you still do a little consulting work at all?
Well, I would. I just don't. No one wants me anymore.
I don't know about that.
I'll turn 70 next year, and I guess most people in the industry think I'm already dead. So, you know.
I don't know about that. Did you ever have branch offices with your business? Can you tell us about that? And, you know, can you take us into the franchising side of it?
Well, I first opened my first branch was in Tampa, Florida, and when it was initially successful, I opened another one in Houston, Texas. This branch was real lucky to get a smoke mansion in the first few weeks that we opened, and that was a $15,000 on-location fire, which was very good to start with. So Atlanta was doing so well that I just made a decision to advertise and franchise Smokemaster. I had no previous success or knowledge about how to franchise, other than just reading books and, you know, trying to find out how you would go about franchising. And I did it, and if it, you know, hadn't had a problem, I would have probably been more successful.
Why don't you tell us about the problem? What exactly happened with that?
Well, after selling franchises in Memphis, St. Louis, and Joliet, Illinois, I transferred my 2 branches, Tampa and Houston, to franchises. And in this very same year, ServiceMaster took me to federal trademark court and made me desist in using my name, as it was causing confusion with their market share. So I gave my franchises a choice to let me bear the expense of changing their name to Smoke Services or letting them go independent with no liability. And, of course, they all chose to go out on their own, and I still remain friends with all of them for many years. But in 1978, I was just content to operate only Smoke Services and as my only location, and not try to be a big dog any longer, more or less.
I think it would be a little bit different today. I think that I don't ever believe that they would have been able to win that suit, but I know how big they were, and how intimidating that the threat of litigation and so on and so forth can be.
There's one question on this list I'm a little curious about here that Cliff put up. He says, what prompted you to buy a Rolls Royce, Major?
Well, I've always bought, expensive cars when I even couldn't afford them. But at the time, I was feeling kind of frisky, with, I guess I had sold some franchises, and I thought, it was going to go really big, and I was having lunch with some adjusters and had a few too many cocktails, I guess, and then I stopped by the dealership, and I couldn't. It was a chocolate brown, brand new, just come in, Rolls Royce Silver Shadow, and I just couldn't resist it. So I kept it for about a year, and I did have a lot of fun with it. But I had to use it at night because I couldn't let any of the adjusters know that I had a Rolls Royce that affected my business.
I thought you
But anyway, it was worthwhile.
I thought you gave a really good tip earlier, and I just wanted to make sure that I got it right. That you kept calling these adjusters whether they gave you work or not. I'm assuming that paid off in that. I don't know. Maybe you could tell me. Do you think it was just that since you were calling on a regular basis, your name was fresh on their mind when something came up, or maybe they couldn't contact someone else and they thought, let's give this guy a try? Do you know? Did you ever check with them on why that worked?
Well, most of these, and not most of the ones I called on, but I would say I had probably 20 adjusters that at some time weren't my customer, but after I, saw them so many times, they would I'd ask them to go to lunch or tell them about my company again, and they would, a lot of them were sick of coming in all the time, but I figured that it would pay off sooner or later, and some of them get a fire in there and they couldn't get Service Master to go look at it or something, and they'd say, well, we just give Major a call. It was worthwhile to persistently call on insurance adjusters. I don't know if that's the case today, because I'm sure it sounds like they've all got contracts with people, so they don't want to use anybody except one person. So that's my impression of today's market.
Tell me about the engraved invitations.
Well, that was it was our first or second year in business. I said it was our anniversary, and it was an engraved invitation, just as it would be a wedding invitation. I had them done very nicely, and in a very nice envelope, and mailed to all the customers that I knew that existed. And in it said that we'd like you to have lunch with you and your partner at the Chateau Fleur de Lis restaurant, which was the most expensive restaurant in Atlanta at the time. At any time, just call and tell the maitre d' you're coming in, and it's all taken care of as far as the expense. And some of them send them back and said they can't, they're not allowed to, accept anything like that. But all in all, over the period of the year, they didn't use them right away, but I must have had 40 to 50 of them do use it. So, and it was productive. All I had to do was get one fire to pay for the whole fund.
Nice, very nice. Well, let's do this, Major. We're going to go to what we call the round table here and bring back Glenn Fellman and Dr. Weil, and we'll go around the table one time and see if anybody has final questions and comments. And then Cliff and I will also have some final questions.
Okay, sure.
Great. Glenn, any questions?
Hello. Well, it's so interesting to hear from a veteran from an industry that has gone through so much change in technology and systems and corporate structure, especially in the last 10 years. And so it's been really great to get the perspective of how things were versus how things are today. I have a question which relates to the labor market, in that I hear from a lot of restoration contractors that they're having a lot of trouble these days finding competent labor, labor who can read and write and that type of thing even. How would you compare the market for labor today versus the way it was 20 or 30 years ago when maybe things were different, Major?
Well, in Atlanta that many years ago, I would say 95% of all my employees were black, and they always worked out better. Today, in Cashiers, in a small way, we've got 100% Mexicans working. Now, I think this is going to vary in any market, but I think you have to find who can do this type of work, or who can be trained to do this type of work at the type of wages that that you can pay to make money with them. I think that's about all I can say.
I appreciate that. I'll pass along to the next person and come back around to me if there's still time.
Very good. Dieter?
Well, I always learn a little bit. It's one of those things. There are many subjects you kind of take for granted, and then when you look a little bit deeper into it, there is a heck of a lot more behind it than what meets the eye, up front. So, I mean, it's tricky to listen to that. As I said, I'm obviously not an expert in that field, but I'm interested in the intricacies of doing business, and if you work hard, you make it, and I think that's good.
And it's a tough business because you're kind of depending on the adjusters, I would think. They hold all the cards, and I know, Dieter, you're not used to that. You've always had clients calling
right.
you, and you didn't have to go out and wine and dine the adjusters, so it's a little bit different for you.
Very much so, yes.
All right. Let's go over to Cliff.
Major, I always wondered what led you to pioneer this computer estimating for damage repair.
Well, back in 1977, I bought my first computer, which was the IBM personal computer, which was one of the first computers. And it cost $6,000 and was one of my smartest purchases, because after I bought it, I decided that I had to make estimates every day of my life, and they were line estimates, and I had to handwrite them. There was no structure to make it easier, so I knew I had to design a program, and get a programmer to initiate it into this new computer. And after it took me a year to with it constantly to make this thing work, and then after I made it work, I was successful in selling it to other restorers. And of course, I don't use it today because it was written in DOS, and I haven't been able to use it recently.
I guess
that's all.
I wanted to ask, you've been a pioneer in this industry. You've been doing this for probably 35, 40 years now. What of all your accomplishments, which are you most proud of, or which do you think stands out?
Well, I felt like just my life, as a restorer, and my accomplishments with Asker, which was, I enjoyed that very much. Doing seminars for a year as taking Martin's place for a year while he took a sabbatical. That was a very fun part of my life, and
I would imagine
my whole life has been very happy. I think I've had divorces, and things like that. But that's to be, that happens.
Right.
I would imagine it had to be pretty satisfying to, go in and have somebody who's in one of the lowest points in their life just after a fire, and to be able to go in there and help them get back on their feet.
It is. It certainly is. And they usually, they don't look at you like they would the insurance adjuster. They're skeptical of the insurance adjuster, but they kind of look at you like you're a friend rather than somebody that's going to come in there and take advantage of their personal contents in their life. They kind of respect that. So that works out good.
I can imagine, too, with your calm demeanor and just during talking to you here right now, you probably gave people a real sense of confidence when you came in, and that had to be satisfying.
I did at one point. I developed a audio-video program on a portable audio-video thing. This was back in the early days, and it would flip through the screens and show the insured and how things are going to be changed. Once she uses our services and everything. I think probably Cliff would probably remember that.
Oh, I do. Yeah, it's like way before laptops, and I was thinking I had one made as well for our deodorizing system, and you look at what it cost and bring people in to film this, and you had to have a speaker narrate it, and this is like
right.
way before laptops and stuff like that. But
it's kind of like a slideshow.
Yeah,
but,
yeah.
Before you could do a radio show out of a conference room in Coriopolis, Pennsylvania.
Huh? The internet. Right.
We've come a long way, Major. Before we go, I just wanted to quickly ask, is there anything that we left out or any memories that you'd like to share with us real quick before we go? And then if you could tell people, if you don't mind, how they could get a hold of you if they would like.
I can't think of anything that you've left out. My phone number is 828-743-5975. My website is capital L, lowercase l, ICHEN 1 at AOL.com, and I'd be glad to talk to anyone that'd like to give me a ring or send me an email.
Perfect.
Well, great. We want to thank you so much for joining us this week on IAQ Radio, and hopefully we'll be able to talk to you again down the road.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Before we go, I want to thank my co-host, the Z-Man, Cliff Slotnick.
It's always a pleasure, Joe.
Thank you, Cliff. The Wingman, Chris Boisel. And, of course, our technical director, Dr. Dietrich Wow. Thanks to Glenn Fellman for joining us with IE Connections What's News. And most importantly, our growing group of loyal listeners, let's set another record this week. We were close last week, but it wasn't a record. Let's download some more shows and set another record. Please come back and join us next Friday at noon for the next broadcast of IAQ Radio.
For IAQ Radio, I'm Spike Reel saying thanks for listening.